To another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we have Andrew Cherico joining us, who covers all things UCF. His work has been featured on Sports Illustrated, Night CBS 24/7, and also does some work with Sons of UCF too. And, Andrew, I've been following your work for a while now, and I'm really excited to have you on and talk some Big 12 football.
Well, thank you for having me on, Rob. This is very exciting. A chaotic time for UCF currently. So lots of things to talk about in terms of transfer portal, recruiting class, and just reflecting on the previous season. So I'm excited to get right into it.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit off camera too, and I guess it's nice having this perspective since we both live in Florida. And a lot of people who are listening who follow UCF football, they know that Scott Frost inherited a little bit of a difficult situation in the sense that a little bit late in the game where he had to kind of step in. You knew the roster was kind of starting from ground zero, but fortunately, the beginning of the season started off fairly well, and then there were just a lot of highs and lows from there, particularly in terms of some injuries and awesome just some undisciplined play, which obviously going to happen when you have a younger team. But Andrew, when you look at this team, what are kind of some of the positives that you have, some of the things that they can improve on, and just your overall assessment of where the program's at right now after signing day?
Yeah. Well, first things first for the positives. I think what Coach Frost wanted to establish in year one with UCF was rebuilding that culture that he had created back in his undefeated season in 2017. So I think that was the first things first, and that went throughout spring camp into fall camp. You saw guys that were connected. And speaking with multiple players throughout the season, I asked them, even though you guys are at a similar point this year as you were last year, does it feel any different? They're like, there's no pointing fingers, there's no blaming each other. They're one team, they're one heartbeat. And I think that's what most stood out to me about this UCF team this year. Coach Frost had them playing hard every opportunity they had them playing with pride and effort, as well as just giving them their best shot on the field. They started off the season, like you mentioned, really well, 3-0, had a big win against North Carolina. Then conference play came around and things kind of took a downward turn. But UCF was close in a lot of games. One score away from tying it up in the final seconds against Kansas, one score away from winning against Houston. So just a couple plays, and this season could have been different. UCF can easily be 7-5 right now if it wasn't for some of those first year mistakes that Coach Frost was experiencing. In terms of, we're talking the penalties, turnovers, and just the lack of quarterback consistency, I think was a major factor this season. It was between Taven Jackson, Cam Fancher, Jakari Brown. Three of those guys were competing all throughout spring until fall, and then even in the beginning of the season, we saw all three quarterbacks play at some point this year, and Taven Jackson was eventually the guy to run away with the job for the rest of the season. But it seemed like that consistency that hadn't been there through fall and through the beginning of the season caught up, and he struggled against some of the tougher teams in the Big 12. UCF's 2 Big 12 wins against the lower teams, talking about Oklahoma State, against West Virginia, teams that are also looking to bounce back in another season in the Big 12.
Yeah, because you brought up a lot of good points there too, because you mentioned the Kansas game, and I can't help but think of that drive where UCF got shut down on 4 plays in a row on the goal line. And I was just thinking to myself as I was watching, I was like, damn, I know that's gonna come back to bite them. But you mentioned too just how many young players are on this team, and also the coaching staff took a while to drive a little bit too. And I think you kind of saw that in terms of some of those decisions and whatnot too. But signing day just happened as well, and Taven Jackson, unfortunately decided to go into the transfer portal, but they brought in 2 guys, one guy, Rocco Marriott, and also Dante Carr, who I think has a lot of similar attributes to Jakari Brown. So that will be kind of interesting if he does end up staying. I'm not sure if he went into the portal, but Andrew, when you kind of look at signing day, what were your kind of general takeaways, and is it kind of the direction you thought they would be going in, or where exactly do you think that they would try to target?
I mean, to begin, it wasn't a signing day that wowed the UCF crowd or the local Orlando fans. Just 13 recruits, 5 of them from the local Florida area, talking North and South Florida. But for UCF, it was about building a foundation. We spoke with Coach Frost on Wednesday, discussing his early signing day moves, and as well as what the team looks forward to in the future. And I think a big part about that was getting some speed on the roster. We know Coach Frost and what he accomplished in 2017 with a player, in 2016 as well, with a player like Adrian Killens. And I think he was trying to attack and find a guy like that. I think two of those players and the potential they have are Kaj Baker and Arthur Lewis, two athletes, two running backs that can change the game with one carry and a good hole. And you talked about the quarterbacks as well. Rocco Merritt, the highest ranked quarterback commit in UCF history during the ranking era, of course. I think that's a big move for UCF, and I think that was the big splash Coach Frost is looking for. Quarterback consistency is something that UCF hasn't had since 2020. The UCF hasn't had one singular quarterback play an entire season since then. So I think it's important that UCF tries to find their guy and stick with him. Do I think Rocco Marriott's going to start in year one? No. Do I think he has a chance of getting some game time in, coming in late in the fourth quarter and getting a couple drives under his belt and being developed as a quarterback by quarterbacks coach Mackenzie Milton? Yes, I do think that's a strong possibility. I do think that's the direction UCF is heading in. Also forgot to note when we were recapping the season before, offensive line coach Sean Clark passed away in the beginning of the season. And that was something that Coach Frost really took time to reflect on during the press conference. He said the team didn't really have a chance to process the death of like another person, a friend, a coach, a brother that they all had love with. And now they kind of had to keep moving on throughout the season. They never got a chance. So UCF will definitely be looking to hire their offensive line coach soon as well. But just a mix of those things plus the signing day, a couple offensive linemen, two defensive linemen, a couple defensive backs, along with Rocco Marriott came three-star tight end Brooks Hall from the same high school, Platte County in Missouri. I think that can help the development of Rocco, and having a good go-to target throughout your time in college could be important. But it's kind of hard to talk about the future of a program when all of these kids, if they wanted to, hypothetically transfer out next year. So it's just it's the reality of college football right now. But I think Coach Frost, that's why he wanted to establish that culture. He wants to build a place where players can come in and know that they have a future there with the program and a reason to stay. Coach Frost wants to turn the ship around as fast as possible.
Yeah, because you brought up a good point that I think is worth elaborating on when you're talking about a program like UCF, especially when the majority of the Big 12 is in the Midwest. I think UCF definitely has a way to kind of capitalize on some of those recruits that are getting overlooked by Florida, the Florida States, and the Miamis of the world. And especially too when you're in a position where you have a guy like Scott Frost who understands what it takes to win in Orlando. He can kind of take a chance on some of those guys who are not getting looked at necessarily. And the selling point of UCF football is not necessarily, hey, we're going to go and win a national championship this year, even though they claimed it back in 2017 when they went undefeated. So I think it's fun that they do that still. But you also have the element of, hey, you're playing in one of the most open conferences in all of college football too. And I think a lot of people overlook that about the Big 12.
Oh, absolutely. I think you hit a great mark with some of the guys that Coach Frost wants to bring in are overlooked. I think that's the kind of identity he wants to continue with UCF. He likes being the underdog. He takes pride in being in the school that you won't see us as the main target, but we can come up and we can sneak in and they can make damage and a lot of nationwide damage, make nationwide noise. As they did in 2017. Nobody really thought of UCF as a team that ever had that potential. And I think that's where Coach Frost kind of wants to lean in. You're a guy in high school who's been overlooked by the FSU. You've been overlooked by Florida and Miami. National schools aren't really looking out to you. Global schools, I should say, at this point. But now UCF is a school willing to give you a chance to shine and become a local hometown hero. I mean, look at RJ Harvey. He was a guy that decided to stay after getting plenty of offers in the transfer portal, and now he's known as a UCF legend. And he was still drafted in the second round to the Denver Broncos, and he's making a great rookie season there so far, scoring plenty of touchdowns this year. So I think that's kind of the identity Coach Frost wants to lean in and say, hey, like, you're going to get a chance to play. You're going to get a chance to compete and carve out a name in UCF history. And I think that's a big selling point.
Yeah, and you use the word, we both use the word overlooked. And you know what, one thing that I overlooked going into this season was I remember thinking about how petrified I was when Scott Frost hired Alex Grinch as their defensive coordinator, especially giving the, let's say, turbulent tenure at USC. But I have to tell you, Andrew, I was pleasantly surprised about what I saw from this defense, and I don't think a lot of people give it as much credit as they deserve. I think a lot of it, part of it is there's not like an all-star guy, so to speak, if
Yeah.
you're picking up what I'm putting down. But at least statistically speaking, defensively, I mean, they definitely did better than people thought. I mean, they were 38th in the nation in total defense and 25th in total passing yards allowed.
Yeah, Rob, I think you hit the mark with Alex Grinch. That was a signing that a lot of people were iffy on, I should say. Iffy was the right word because he's had a successful past. He's been at the highest level and has succeeded, but he's also failed at the highest level. And I think that's one of the things in college football that Coach Frost really kind of related with on Grinch, and we spoke with him throughout the season, was sometimes things just don't work out how you think they will. And sometimes you can be at the top, and the next thing you know, you're at the bottom. You're wondering, where did things go wrong? That same ideology was with Grinch. And I think he just wanted to give Grinch a chance to show that he's still one of the top defensive coaches in the league, in college football. And I think what he did with UCF's defense is severely underlooked, overlooked, however you want to put it. He turned UCF into one of the best passing defenses in the nation, and then was among the top half in rushing defense in the Big 12 as well. So that can't be overlooked. Recently announced edge rusher Malachi Lawrence was first team All Big 12. UCF had plenty of recognition in the All Big 12 teams for honorable mentions. Some guys that jump off the list: Cole Kozlowski, Lewis Carter, Jaden Bellamy, just a solid group of guys that was put together pretty much in one transfer portal cycle. So it's a lot of credit due to UCF and Coach Alex Grinch, who we speak with every week. We spoke with, I should say, every week with the pressers, and he was very candid about the defense and the effort and what he needs to do to game plan for the next opponents. Very intellectual guy, knows what he's talking about, and I think just a guy who's a motivator. Getting to watch him in practice was an experience, I should say. It's really funny because you see him cursing at the guys on the practice field, literally going up to them and yelling. And then 30 minutes later, he's having a casual conversation with us in the press conference room. So those are kind of the reflections he is as a coach. And I just think he's a great guy. And it was a home run hire by UCF. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Grinch is getting some calls or some text about, hey, like, are you thinking about it? I do think he ultimately stays. But if there is one guy on UCF's coaching staff that is getting calls, it's probably him.
Yeah, and I appreciate how you kind of mirrored Alex Grinch's kind of story compared to Scott Frost, right? Because I think in many ways, Scott Frost and Alex Grinch were both kind of guys that were, for the most part, dismissed by all of college football. I mean, I'm not going to get into Scott Frost too much at Nebraska, but the general takeaway was that you couldn't win a close game. And, for everyone who remembers his 2021 season where they just could never win in the fourth quarter, that you guys know that too. But the one thing that UCF has going for them too is over the past, since 2018, really, they've shown a knack to win. I mean, you think of Josh Heupel, who was there from 2018 to 2020. You think of Gus Malzahn to a lesser degree from 2021 to 2024. And then even if you want to go a little further back, George O'Leary was there for almost 10 seasons as well, who finished with a winning percentage of 544. So that's just a long-winded way of saying that even though UCF's in the Big 12 and there's a lot of room for development there, that a lot of different coaches have proven that you can win there with the right resources.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Coach Frost was the guy who took UCF from you can win at this school to you can really win at this school. And when Gus Malzahn came, he said his message to the team was they want to become a national, like with the right coach, UCF can become a national threat, contending for the playoffs each season. That we all know how that went with Coach Gus. It didn't end the way a lot of people thought it would, but I think Coach Frost, well, first, to go back to what you had said, Coach Frost said he wouldn't have taken another college football job if it wasn't UCF calling. So the fact that this was a one-time deal for UCF and he wanted to come back and succeed, he was happy at UCF. He said a quote in his introductory press conference was, "Sometimes you forget to stop climbing the ladder when you're happy." He was pressured. He knew the obligation and responsibility. He had to go coach in Nebraska, but in reality, he was happy at UCF. He was truly happy, and he accomplished a lot of great things. And it's only one can imagine if he had stayed and continued to build on what he had. I mean, it probably wouldn't have been another 12-0 season, but it could have been very similar and continue UCF in that direction, that trajectory. He led UCF into the Big 12 for sure. Him and Heupel gave him that jump. And now for UCF, it's about finding their niche in the Big 12. We've been here first season. They made a bowl game, haven't made a bowl game since. Was very close this season, as I mentioned before. But for Coach Frost, he knows this school can be back on the map. And they're close games. That's what's going to bite. That's what bit them in the butt this year. And we have to see if that changes next season. But Coach Frost does want to build a winner here in UCF. He often compared had parallels this season compared to his first season at UCF back in 2016. Said just a lot of things didn't go right, and then out of nowhere they took that jump. I asked Coach Frost about that directly, and he says, "I think we progressed a little faster than anyone expected." And even himself, he was surprised by how quickly the team progressed. So I'm not saying Coach Frost thinks he's going to go 12-0 next year, but he does expect a jump in talent and quality, and most importantly, wins.
Yeah, and the thing is too is a lot of people are going to look at a UCF box score and they're going to look past the other three games and just think that they're just a team that's rebuilding. And yes, there is an element of that too, right? But ultimately, I think what has been the most fun to watch about UCF this year is the fact that these young guys, even though there's a bunch of new players there, it definitely feels like a legitimate team and a legitimate unit where they're all kind of coming together. Because even in the press conferences I watched with Scott Frost and Alex Grinch and the rest, and Steve Cooper and the rest of the staff, they all had a unified message together and they all had each other's back too.
Yeah, there's no finger pointing. There's no. Coach Frost says he wants to keep this entire coaching staff together if he can. He believes in building consistency and having a strong foundation in terms of building a winner. That's what you need. It's hard, especially in this era of college football, to build a winner with consistency since there's so many players moving each transfer portal cycle, even the recruiting, with all the flips, the late flips that happen, and guys saying, I'm going to commit here, flipping the next day and flipping back and jumping back and forth. Nobody really knows what happened. And the one quote that stuck out to me most from Coach Frost's press conference, and I think he got a little bit of slack, like he got a little bit of pushback from it. But he said college football is broken in the current state that it is, with the limited regulations and the NIL era and just the freedom that so many coaches, teams, and players have to say, oh, if we have more money, we're going to win. And he said that's a terrible model for college football. And he wants to be known as an advocate for change. He wants to be the guy that says, I'm going to step up and say, this is not an acceptable model for college football. But for Coach Frost and his staff, he wants to keep it consistent. I think that's what's most important to him. And he wants to build with players that want to stay 2 years, not just one and done, but he wants guys 2 and 3 years. Recently, talking about some transfer portal news, wide receiver Wade Charles, who was a freshman this past season, showed such potential and flashes of greatness for UCF. And it was a big question mark if he was going to stay, but he recently announced that he will be staying and coming back for year 2. And that's just a win for UCF in the portal. And that's the kind of consistency Coach Frost is looking for, not only his players, but future leaders on the team.
Yeah, and you brought up consistency, and you brought up identity, and you brought up unity. So the last question that I'll ask you is, given all the younger guys on this team, and they're obviously trying to be as diligent as possible to keep the nucleus there as much as possible. For those who are listening, who are some under the radar players, let's say that you think could be a lot more of a bigger factor for UCF next season?
Are we talking about on the team in terms of signing class, or just from last season as well?
Both, just names, just names that you think people should be on the lookout for.
Absolutely. So I think I'll just go off and name 2 must keeps from this past season for UCF: tight end Dylan Wade and wide receiver Dwayne Speedy Thomas Jr. Both of those guys played key parts in the offense. I think it was important that Speedy Thomas is like the ultimate gadget player. He was taking handoffs in the backfield, getting end arounds and jet sweeps in the slot, and then catching deep balls from Taven Jackson for a good part of the season. So he was everywhere in the offense where you need him to be. And then Dylan Wade, the kind of speed he has as a tight end is unmatched, and especially in the Big 12. That's the kind of speed that they want. They want to outspeed and out hustle teams to the ball, with the ball, beating guys around the edge. I think those are two guys that UCF must keep. And another name to look out for, it is unknown if he'll enter the transfer portal. He's been quiet pretty much all season. He had an injury before the beginning of the season. Darius Farmer. He was was a decommitted from, well, not decommitted, excuse me, transferred from West Virginia after his first season there. He was originally a UCF commit, went to West Virginia, now back at UCF, experienced an injury before the season. I think if he's a guy that returns to UCF's offense, he can be a major factor. Throughout spring camp, he was one of the consistent go-to guys for the three quarterbacks in the competition, but he constantly made the defensive backs pay. And now defensively, I think Lewis Carter is a must-keep guy. He was a linebacker transfer. He was just outstanding this season. I think he provided a lot more than many expected in terms of his pursuit to the ball, pressures on the quarterback, and even pass breakups in the middle of the field. A lot of these linebackers on this roster weren't great in pass coverage, but Lewis Carter definitely had his moments. And I'll end off with one more defensive guy who's a must-keep. I do some more, actually. Jaden Bellamy, because it's just popping into my head. Jaden Bellamy, defensive back. He transferred from, I believe it was Syracuse. I think he had one of the most outstanding seasons for a defensive back in the Big 12 this year, and I think it just went extremely under the radar for the consistency that he had. He wasn't often targeted, but when he was, he often made a big play on the ball. Not too many interceptions, but you know what they say, when you're not being targeted as a defensive back, that's a good thing. And then lastly, a guy who experienced an injury in the middle of the heart of the defensive line in the middle of the season, Horace Lockett, who I predicted to be UCF's MVP on defense, or not MVP, but more of like that player who's going to surprise a lot of people earlier in the season, had Horace Lockett. He is a huge guy. He was, in the beginning of the season, just stuffing the run up the middle, constantly creating pressure on the quarterback. And I'm almost thinking if he was winning, if he was a part of the team during the finale of the season, I think that defense, as good as it was, could have won one more game with him present on that defensive line and potentially reach bowl eligibility.
Exactly, too, because I can think of so many other kind of players like that too, like KJ Jefferson, for example. I think to myself, if he could have maybe been at UCF the season before, I think that combo with him and RJ Harvey probably would have been even more special than people thought. But Andrew, hey, I appreciate being generous with your time and coming on to the show. And where can people find you on Twitter or any other social media platforms you might have?
Absolutely, Rob. So I'm thank you for having me on, first of all. It's been a blast talking UCF football. Anybody wants to talk UCF, I'm more than down for it. Where you can find me, you can find all of my article outlinks, and you can reach me at andrewcherico.com. That's pretty self-explanatory. You can find me on X/Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays, at Andrew_Cherico. And for a majority of my beat work on UCF, you can find my video broadcasting side, where I do game recaps, I do press conference recaps, and I do analysis for UCF at the Sons of UCF on YouTube. And you can also find my articles and my message board posts, as I am a recruiting analyst and beat reporter for Latavius Murray's Knights 24/7. I'm often giving insight with Insider Scoop on the team and breaking the news on the latest commits for UCF.